Welcome to Around the Table, where voters get to ask their questions.
We're going to start with some flank steaks, broccoli, and Amy's famous potato bombs.
Basically our go-to menu anytime we have guests.
Today we're in El Paso, Texas, at the home of Beto O'Rourke.
How are you? Good.
Beto. ABC News has carefully chosen 3 undecided voters to bring their questions to the table tonight as they decide who will get their vote in the Democratic presidential primary.
It seems like a good place for us to start. We're in your home in El Paso, Texas. Your community just endured a horrific mass murder. I know that's what's kept you off the campaign trail.
Viviana knows this very well. We are this beautiful, safe, kind, warm, welcoming people. One of the safest cities in the United States of America, and also one of the most diverse cities. A quarter of those who live here were born somewhere else. And more than 80% of the population is Mexican American or Hispanic. And I think for those reasons, we were targeted. The thing that makes us so special, and I think contributes so much to the greatness of this country, they for some reason wanted to take that from us or change us. And I think as sad as we all are, we were also extraordinarily proud of the way that El Paso has responded, knowing that the act of terror will not define us. It is the way in which we come together, and perhaps the example that we provide to the rest of the country. This is the way that you are good to one another.
Well, I know you've proposed universal background checks before. How has your view on gun control evolved, changed, if at all, since the shooting?
It's hard for me to escape the conclusion that we have too many guns in this country that are too easily accessed. There are 320 million, más o menos, Americans. There are 390 million guns in this country. In many places, we don't have meaningful background checks. And in every place, almost every place, you can buy a weapon like the military-style assault rifle that was used in El Paso that was designed for no other purpose than to kill people.
I think something that's happening in our community, because I come from a faith community, is people feeling like, well, that's the first freedom that will be taken away. And then what's next? There's just this fear around it. I was telling Caleb, I was at the airport today. I was behind a guy who literally had on a shirt with an AK-47 on it that said United in Faith. Like, there's this identity that's like part of like owning guns and religious freedom and how these things like coexist together. What does common sense gun reform look like?
It would begin with a background check on every weapon purchased and every weapon transferred, ideally. And I think this is perhaps a little bit more controversial, but I think you should also have to have a license for owning firearms.
You know, we see these murderers and perpetrators that are writing white supremacist manifestos before they go out and commit these heinous crimes, and it's like, okay, we do need stricter laws on guns. We do need more regulations on gun control, but at the same time, we also need someone who's going to hold them accountable for the motivation behind it. Like, I feel like our president now is creating such a tumultuous and just giving a platform for those people who have those beliefs, who believe in racism, who believe in white supremacy, to go out and commit these acts, and there's no accountability, there's no just blatant, this is wrong. And so I just want to know from you, what are you gonna do to address that?
I think acknowledging the truth of what you just said is an important place for the president to start. Acknowledging our past and the fact that the very foundation of this country, the greatness and the wealth that was built for much of our history was built by people who were enslaved and forced to do it, kidnapped and brought here against their will in the first place. There's also been, when it comes to communities of immigrants, an undercurrent of racism or nativism that was always under the surface to some degree. Not that that was unfelt by the people against whom it was directed, but at least we attempted to form a more perfect union. We attempted to live by the ideals that were foundational to the country, that we're all created equal. We never quite got there, but we never stopped trying until now, where you have a president who is so openly nativist and racist. And though that is a very strong word, it is accurate. And I'm confident that if we don't call things by their true names, we'll never address them.
And so, the president's racist?
Absolutely. Calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, calling Klansmen and neo-Nazis very fine people, proposing to ban all people of one religion from the shores of a country that is comprised of people the world over from every tradition of faith.
You know, people are going, you can't blame Trump for the racism. I'm like, you're right. I'm not blaming him, but what I'm saying is he's giving people permission to do it explicitly.
But when you call the President of the United States racist, aren't you implying by that people that support him are also racist?
No, and I don't think, as a country, regardless of the politics, we can afford to write anybody off. And there may be any number of reasons that somebody supports President Trump, and I want to be very respectful of that. And I think it's important to describe his actions, his decisions, the consequences of them, and make sure that people can make an informed decision going into 2020. But I will say, and I agree with Tess, that Trump has encouraged the racists in this country.
I read where when he first got involved in politics, or told you you want to be involved in politics, you cried. You were not happy.
Well, he was already involved, and he was on the city council, finishing his 6 years on the city council. And out of the blue one day, told me he wanted to run for the U.S. Congress. And it caught me by surprise, and I didn't necessarily have the most positive perceptions of those that have been in office at times. And so I was afraid that he would change, that he would go to D.C., he'd be surrounded by this different life, and that he would be distorted by that. And just, you know.
I think she said, "I don't want you to turn into an this was the exact phrase.
And so he didn't run that cycle. But we then spent the next, year and a half talking about what that might look like and how that might affect our family, and then he ran in the next one.
Well, and now he's running for president.
And now he's running for president.
Did you guys ever foresee that?
No.
Like, this has never been on your radar until.
No. When I call, at 11 o'clock at night and just got back and I'm shredded and I'm just like, Amy, this is really hard and we have a really hard day tomorrow. She's there to provide the moral support, but she's also doing that for Ulysses and Molly and Henry when they come home from school. Then she's also working. And so her strength is just extraordinary. So lucked out, absolutely.
One of the other things that seems to me what happened in El Paso brought front and center is, again, for our nation, is immigration, right? And you're opposed to decriminalizing that, right?
No, I would ensure that anyone who comes to this country, and whether they come to a port of entry or whether, as this administration is forcing them to do, they're crossing in between ports of entry at the U.S.-Mexico border, they're seeking asylum or refuge or shelter, if they're fleeing persecution or domestic abuse, they will not be criminally prosecuted. And in fact, they will not be detained or warehoused or put in a Border Patrol cell in Clinton, Texas, as so many kids have been forced to do. We would have a family case management program that would allow them their dignity to live in the community at a fraction of the cost, with a much better chance that they would attend their court hearing, follow our laws, and pursue a legal, safe, orderly process to come to this country.
So you do want to decriminalize? Or you don't want to decriminalize?
No, so in those instances I do. The permanent legal residents, the green card holders already here, make them U.S. citizens, free dreamers from any fear of deportation, address the underlying causes of outmigration and refugees and asylum seekers from Central America. And then I expect there to be a lawful, orderly, safe process for you to come to this country, and I expect you to follow that. And in those exceptions where for some reason you have to cross in between a port of entry seeking asylum, we're going to take care of you. But if we've given you that lawful, safe, orderly path to do that, and you still insist on defying our laws, I will reserve the right to criminally prosecute you. So I think that's a fair bargain for us to ask.
I have an aunt who legally tried to come to the country legally, paper, going to the courts, going for 20 years. It took her 20 years. She first came in legal into the country, got her paperwork done, brought in her husband, then eventually her kids. Two of them ended up, because it took so long, the courts are inundated with that stuff,
Right.
that two of her kids ended up coming into the country illegally. But it took her 20 years, Beto, and it took her a lot of money because she would go to one attorney, okay, I'll fill out these forms. To fill out some forms, you know, and then a year later, how's my case going? Well, you know, it's behind and blah, blah, blah. So she'd get tired, I'm gonna go to another attorney. 20 years. After she brought everybody in, 2 years later, she passed away.
Part of immigration reform would have to be increasing the caps that we have right now, the per country caps that we have. So if you're coming from the Philippines or Mexico, two countries where you'll wait more than 20 years, you don't have that kind of a wait time. Which when you have 20 years, you can understand how somebody is going to make that decision. You know what? I've got to make money for my family. There's an employer who wants to hire me. There's a family member who I want to live with. And at some point, that's going to be too compelling for me. So legalizing those who are here already doing these jobs, providing a safe, lawful, orderly, quick path to come in, and then being vigilant against those who have no place in this country.
This issue moves you.
It really moves me because it's a human issue for me, and we're responding to a humanitarian crisis with a military force, and I don't know why the country with the greatest wealth in the world can't respond in a humanitarian way, and we can't be involved. We're involved in all kinds of other things happening in other countries. How can we be involved there so people can stay where they want to live and where they want to flourish?
So Tess, are you a evangelical / liberal?
It's so sad to me that the word like evangelicals have gotten, I feel like we have the bow on us too, that if we're evangelical, we are anti-immigrant, we are not, we're not liberal, we're not involved in social justice. None of those things define me. We feel politically homeless. We're looking for a broader option. And I didn't vote in 2016 in the presidential election because morally, I couldn't. Why should a pro-life Christian who is not okay with Trump vote for you?
So this is a conversation I've had with my mom, who raised us in a Catholic home, and I try to find the common ground and have shared with her that as this state has restricted the right for a woman to make her own decisions about her own body and has closed down so many clinics that provide abortions, they're also closing down clinics that provide cervical cancer screenings and family planning help, and just the ability to see a provider in a state that has not expanded Medicaid and has made it so hard to see a doctor. We're the least insured state in the country. And that has in part led to a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. That wasn't the intended consequence. I don't believe that was what lawmakers and legislators wanted, but that has been the end result. And so I hope that I've found some common ground with my mom in saying that whether it's Planned Parenthood or another family planning clinic, in addition to ensuring that choice means not only having the right, but the access to the provider and the services, it's also about saving lives in this country and in our communities.
People have strong feelings about education and how you pay for that, right?
Yeah, well, first, that's my concentration. My concentration is in teaching as I'm a student at Texas Tech, but also because my mom, like I was saying earlier, she raised triplets, my mom and my dad. And so my mom actually pays for all 3 of us to go to school, as well as pay for herself to go back to school to receive her master's. And so it's very important to me because I'm about to graduate now, and I'm more nervous and scared than anything that I'm not going to be able to be stable once I graduate, because I wouldn't be in college right now if I didn't have a loan. I remember freshman year, like being at Texas Tech University and calling my mom and being like, I can come home. Like, do you need me to come home? Is this too expensive? So we need college to be affordable. But on top of that, we also have to pay attention to the schools and institutions that get our kids and our youth to college, because like we were saying earlier, these schools are severely underfunded. When you're a minority, you're more likely to go to a school in a low socioeconomic area that doesn't have the adequate tools to teach. Our teachers are not being paid well. And so we can talk about free college, and I think that's a lofty goal, but at the same time, when are we going to also support those institutions that help get our youth there, you know what I mean? And so I think education reform as a whole needs to be a big topic, and I would love to hear what you have to say about your plans, and is that a #1 priority for you?
It's a big priority for us, and for all the reasons that you just described, starting in elementary education, ensuring that every child begins that education not at 4 or 5 years old in kindergarten, but at 3 or 4 years old in pre-K. We learned that some children on the first day of kindergarten, and we just had the first day of school yesterday in El Paso, they're already 10 months back in reading comprehension. And they're just likely never going to catch up when you start out at that level of disadvantage. So what if you move the starting line back so it was a little bit more even for everyone in that race? What if you acknowledge that segregation today in public education in many places is as bad or worse than it was on the eve of Brown versus Board in 1954? We now know that minority-majority schools nationally are underfunded to the tune of about $23 billion. So we propose a permanent education fund that would meet that gap every single year. We also propose a $500 million annual investment in historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions to create teacher training academies that ensure that we get the absolute best teachers in front of those kids. And then when it comes time to go to college or to choose a career, every young person should be able to make that choice without regard to cost. So debt-free higher education, and not just tuition, but room and board and books. That should not be a barrier to entry, and it is right now. And you mentioned your fear as you approach graduation, or even the decision you almost made to leave college so that it would be more affordable for your family. Don't want you worrying about that. So we need to make the investment there. But we also have to ensure that for anyone who chooses not to go to college, that there's a path for them as well. And that means elevating unions, the ability to enter an apprenticeship, to learn a trade or a skill that you will have for the rest of your life and will ensure that you command a living wage and dignity for the rest of your life.
I love everything you're saying, but I also am like, how?
Yeah. So it's not inexpensive, and it would require a serious investment, but it would produce an extraordinary return for this country. It's an investment in people and in communities and their ability to reach their potential. So as an example, that college plan that I just described could be between $75 to $80 billion a year. The return on that is the earning potential of everyone who goes to college. It's not a question of resources. As you said earlier, we're the wealthiest country on the face of the planet. It is where we choose to direct that wealth and the investment going forward. And my very strong belief is it has to be in people and in their potential. And that's healthcare, that's education, that's a living wage, that's childcare. It's the health of their community. So there are choices for us to make for sure, but we can afford it.
So I know that Cable had some didn't fully understand your health care plan. Can you say more about that? Because that certainly matters to him.
So the goal is universal, guaranteed, high-quality care. The way to get there is ensuring that everyone who today has no care at all, aren't insured, aren't covered, aren't in Medicare or Medicaid or private insurance, automatically be enrolled in Medicare. If you are insufficiently insured, you have insurance but you can't afford the co-pays, the premium's too much, you can't bridge that deductible, so you're just not going to even use the health care that you've been paying for, you can elect to move into Medicare. But if you have employer-sponsored insurance that you like, because it works for you, works for your family, you can keep it. If you're a member of a union that fought for a health care plan, and maybe you did that in lieu of a wage increase or other earned benefits, and you like that plan, you can keep it. That way we get to universal coverage and preserve choice and trust people to make their own decisions.
How, like, we want to, like, you're going to, if you go toe to toe with Trump, like, how are you going to do this? Because I feel like you're so respectful of other people, but we need a bulldog in there.
You know, when it comes to these debates, to be honest with you, this idea that you can release a canned attack line that you have rehearsed, that you can say, you know, Byron, in 1973, you did the following things. That stuff is not me, to be honest with you. And I recognize that it's not those other contenders who are the challenge to the country. It's Donald Trump. And the solutions cannot be defined by pitting us against one another or writing parts of the country off. It's got to be including everyone. And that's what I want to get across in every conversation, in every moment, in every town hall, and what I've got to do a better job of doing on the debate stage. So within that incredibly artificial format with 9 other people on the stage, in 30 seconds to make your point, you know, I want to do a better job. I really do. I want to be strong. But at some point, and you were asking me about this earlier, you know, what is success like for you? And success is winning the nomination. Success is defeating Trump. Success is leading and helping to heal this very divided country. Success is doing that without compromising myself or what we believe in and who we are. And if that's the price, it's going to be somebody else. You know, I got to be me at the end of the day. And so, but you're right. It's a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge.